Hello, everyone on Zoom and on YouTube live stream. I am Henry Crawford, and welcome to the April 2021 edition of Poets versus the Pandemic. Tonight, we're celebrating National Poetry Month, as well as the first anniversary of Poets versus the Pandemic. It should be quite a celebration, as we have poets David Keplinger reading from his new book, The World to Come, along with Wayne Miller and Jenny Molberg. With me tonight as co-host is WordWorks founder, Karen Alanier. So let me thank all of you who've been with us over the last year, who've supported our program, which is about providing reading space for poets whose books have come out during this time of the pandemic. And let me also thank the WordWorks for helping make all of this possible. Okay, well, let's get started. First, and most importantly, we want you to purchase the poets' books. So I have put a link into the chat that will take you to places where you can purchase the books of each of our poets tonight. We also have a donation on that page, so a donation button. So please don't be shy about donating to our program. We at the WordWorks will thank you wholeheartedly. I will also put into the chat a link where you can follow all of our WordWorks online readings, sign up on the registration form, and you'll be on our mailing list to get Zoom links for all our readings. Now, if you want to ask a question of our poets, please feel free to drop a question into the chat. We encourage it. We'll try to get to as many of them as we have time. Also, tonight, for the first time, we are going to share links of the poet's poems so that you will be able to follow along with PDFs of the poet's readings. Each poet will put a link into their PDF into the chat. If you want to follow along, click on the chat link when you see it. Depending upon your device, you may have to save the document to your local computer, but whatever it is, you should be able to open it up in the Acrobat Reader on your computer. Just keep your eye on the chat link if you'd like to do that. A couple more things. Please join us Monday, May 3rd, 2021, when Cafe Muse Online will present David Baker and Carl Phillips. And we'll be back here again on May 19, 2021, with our own Karen Alanier, who'll be reading from her new book, How We Hold On. So let me introduce David Keplinger. David Keplinger is the author of 7 collections of poetry, including The World to Come, winner of the 2020 Minds on Fire Prize, Another City, which came out in 2018, and which was awarded the 2019 Rilke Prize. Among his other collections are The Most Natural Thing and The Prayers of Others. Finally, in 2020, David was the recipient of the annual Emily Dickinson Award from the Poetry Society of America. Few poets I know work so hard on behalf of other poets and poetry as a whole. He is a tireless teacher and mentor. He is a genius at helping writers to bring out their best with a grace that honors that individual writer's voice. And he carries himself with a richness of spirit and a humility that belies so many awards and accomplishments. He's a good friend. And so I'm happy to welcome again to PVP. We've had him before. He was on the very first episode. So he's a recidivist, we can say. Let me introduce David Keplinger.
Henry, thank you so much. It's great to be here. And it's great to see, I have the gallery view on right now, so it's great to see the faces of so many friends. And thank you for taking time on a Wednesday evening, a beautiful evening here in Washington, to be with us poets. It's also wonderful to be here with my beloved friends, Jenny and Wayne. So I wanted to dedicate this reading to my friend Sibylla Beyer, who has a very special place in my heart. She offered me a place to stay last summer in August in Lenox, Massachusetts, where I finished the last poems of this collection. And it was really a magical summer. I have a poem that I'm going to read later that actually takes place in her yard in the cottage where I stayed. This book is also dedicated to my friend Chuck Larson and to my spiritual guides, Parker and Sharon. So I have a lot of people to thank for this collection. And also to you, Henry, for your undying help in bringing poets to the stage, even during this time. So last night I was walking around DC. It was around 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and I walked past this little tree on T Street. It was in the middle of the city. And coming from this little tree was the loudest cicada sound you can imagine. And these must have been the first cicadas to appear in the city. I don't think that they're supposed to appear for another couple of months, but for those of you who are in the DMV, you know that this brood that's coming out this summer is the one that was born 17 years ago. And they've been gestating underground for 17 years. They're just about to crawl out and cause a huge storm of singing in the summertime. But I heard the first ones. They were like the scouts that came out. And I couldn't help but think, well, what do they think of us now? You know, this is definitely not 2004. Everyone's walking around with masks on. They're probably very confused. But I love the cicadas because I heard this once. The cicadas are born in periods of prime numbers. This particular brood, I said, is 17 years in the making, but there are others that are 7 years in the making. And I think that this happens because it gives less a chance for them to appear in the same summer and to really cause a racket. But I love that math of existence. And in a way, this book is born out of that idea that there is a math of existence, and I partake of it, and the cicadas do, and that tree does, and the city does. Last night, there was, I guess, not so much jubilation as a feeling of rightness in the city that we were all taking part in too. And there's a kind of math of existence to that as well. So this first poem is really in connection with that idea. It's called Premise. That your shoes are two fish, a school that moves by the singular will. That the body is here, but elsewhere too. That there exists a body of wind, one for you, one for the city, the country, the planet. That there's one wind moving all of this just so. Even the bride in the white wedding gown, and the groom in the charcoal suit, the beautiful car that's waiting for them, the vast night. This book began with a sequence which meditates on the 7 spheres of medieval mysticism. 7 planets moved through the sky, the stars stayed fixed, and the old idea was that these spheres were alive, and that when a soul was born, they passed through those spheres and gathered, as they passed through each one, certain metals that made up a body. So the first half of the world to come is about our gathering those metals. And then the second half of the world to come is about our taking them off and becoming invisible and becoming really small as we get older. So here are just a couple of those planet poems. The moon. I came here for a body and will not leave until I get one. I told the old clerk of the moon. He was thin. He was wan as Bartleby, staring at a point just past me. I prefer not, he said, and shook his bald head. The offices were cold. I was shivering, less than naked, without a body. As is expected in these kinds of interactions, the clerk pushed up his small glasses, and I began to beg. I had nothing to barter but my impeccable, perfect lack. Have mercy on me, was all that came to mind. It was only then he sighed as he slid the first fingernail, as small as a doge's gold ducat, across the surface of the desk. Mercury. Whatever comes to life must learn to be fast. Whatever approaches death must learn to be slow. Whatever grows and goes forward is a student of the fast. Whatever stays in stillness is a student of the slow. On Mercury, you have to go to school for that. There are classes hugely popular taught by roaches, as well as courses few attend taught by stones. When I finally jumped on that planet and held on for dear life, spinning with my legs draped off the edge, a stone advised me to fall far behind, drop out, be quiet, and try not to succeed. Always it's the stone to show you freedom, like Mercury, unalterable and dense, but faster than anything. And then the last of these I'll read is Mars. It was a world of pure ire, red ore, and despite all the hype, the only intelligence on Mars were little microbes that swam like swinging maces. I had to go against my will, and I'm still angry. I resented the trip, the cost of it, the cold flight, the hard landing. I kept thinking I should leave, make my escape, and go home. Or I could look up at it again with some distance now, twinkling, even spiritual. But I was told I had to stay, and I was handed a shield and a uniform. And part of me, like part of you, like anything as long as it lives, did stay. Here's a poem that was requested of me. It's called Sassoferrato. In Sassoferrato, it's the ultramarine that holds the idea of Mary looking down at her hands, that captures the spirit of her prayer. It's a painting about the sea in love with the mountain crest, just as the mountain crest grasps how it will never know itself, like the sea knows it. The sea at Carmel was similar. It surrounded the glass windows, and at night I heard colors like a musician does. My mother was dying. She was more pain than body then. And when the body receded and then the pain just after, slowly what was left was pure crystal, blue salt. It was Sassoferrato who associated this color with the mother, the force of love that cradles and crashes over the thing until it is the thing. And this is called Danse Macabre. Someone is holding out a globe of the world as it might look in the far future. And everything is already all right. There are just no people on this globe. If you look very closely at one of the small islands remaining, some bees do their danse macabre around the undisturbed hive, the size of a severed human head. But they have never seen a severed head with their 1,000 eyes. They cover the hive like a beard, but they have never seen a beard. They move in and out of the eyes, which to them are not eyes, but small compartments full of doors and hallways. The only other worlds they know are flowers, some bent and rotting on the lime green fuse, some still facing upward on the globe, inside the perfectly temperate, empty, quiet, remarkably dark theater. And I'll read one more poem from this section, and then I'll read from the last section of the book, and then pass it along to our next reader. This is called The Large Hadron Collider. While you sleep, the Large Hadron Collider in Geneva, Switzerland, is hard at work to infiltrate your dreams. Though you may think you sit in a quiet room, a man this time named David, with a baby inside you, but up high in the heart. The baby moving its legs, its arms, and slow kicks and clenches. You're actually the subject of the dream. The protons bore into each other at unimaginable speeds to forge a small aperture, a peephole, through which this world can briefly gaze into yours. There I can watch you without your knowledge, hold the pregnancy so confidently, so adeptly. One might believe it's the natural way of things. Okay, and then this is from the second half. I'll just read 2 or 3 more. This is called Angels and Wounds. And it's in the moment where the poems are more about invisibility than they are about putting on the medals of the body. A play called Angels and Wounds by David Keplinger that goes on for years and has no curtain, where the author plays one of the parts. And some of the scenes, it's the wound in him that sees the same wound in the other. What's reenacted is an old disaster. In some of the scenes, it's his angel that addresses the other's wound, or it's reversed, and he's the wounded one, drawn to the angel. Codependence casts its green light on the stage. There's hardly any dialogue, except the sound of silverware, bottle caps, slamming doors. But in some scenes, the angel in him engages the angel in the other. It's the same play his parents put on, and he plagiarized everything. And typewriter. At the top of the old typewriter where the ribbon used to go, someone has threaded a spool of white bandage tape. No words had been typed over it, though it was carefully aligned between the type guide and the black platen like a rolling pin, ready for a page to be inserted. I was told it had sat like this in the house for 100 years since the end of the First World War, when typewriter ribbon was in shortage, but bandages and medical supplies were made in surplus. I understand. The words do not describe anything. They only wrap themselves as evidence tightly around the invisible body, the invisible wound, the invisible genitals, the invisible hand. And then the last poem of the book is called The Third Person. And once again, let me thank you all for coming tonight, and thank you, Henry, for your saintly patronage of poets during this time. The third person. One must speak of the eternal self in the third person only. The eternal self stood beneath the olive trees that wagged their branches. It lived off sunlight once, and the gloppy impasto of rain. The eternal self once had hands and a face, eyes and a mouth. But snails ate up the grass, then the sky, the sun, until there was no world, no light, the body invisible. All that remained were birds who knew how to fly at night, and snails and insects, instead of words that speak of an eternal self, instead of the work of the hands. Thank you all.
It's David Keplinger, and a wonderful reading. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, David. Wow. Okay. So is this an all-star lineup or not? Let's go. Let's keep the momentum going here, and let me introduce Wayne Miller. Tonight, coming to us from Denver, Colorado, is Wayne Miller. Wayne's 5 collections of poetry are We the Jury, 2021, Post, 2016, which won the Rilke Prize and the Colorado Book Award. The City, Our City, which came out in 2011, and The Book of Props in 2009, and Only the Senses Sleep in 2006. He's a translator who's also co-edited several books. His awards include the George Bogan Award, the Lucille Medwick Award, the Lyric Poetry Award, a Ruth Lilly Fellowship, the Bess Hoskins Prize, and a Fulbright to Queen's University in Belfast. He's a professor of English and creative writing at the University of Colorado at Denver, and a co-curator of the Unsung Masters series, an editor and managing editor of Copper Nickel. Well, I try to keep these intros short so that you have more time with the poet, but it's hard to cherry pick from a body of work that is all cherries. So, but let me say, just a few years ago, I was just getting started with my own work, and I had the privilege of reading with Wayne in DC. It was an honor then, and it will be your enjoyment now. So let's bring up to the PvP stage, Wayne Miller. Come on, have at it.
Thank you so much, Henry. Let me change my view here so that I'm looking at not just myself. I'm going to be, thank you, Henry. The series is amazing, and I love this idea of trying to support writers who have books coming out during the pandemic, which is hard and weird for everyone I know who has books coming out in this strange time. And I also just want to say it's great to read with David and Jenny, who are such excellent poets, and I just like both of their works so much. So it's great to be here with them. And I'm going to read from my new book, We the Jury, which just came out in March. And I've been giving a lot of these Zoom readings, and so I'm going to try to read some poems in this mix that I don't usually read. And so I'm trying things out on you. So if it's terrible, I don't want to know. I'm going to start. I'm originally from Cincinnati, Ohio, and Ohio has been having this problem with fentanyl and heroin and all of this kind of stuff. And two of my closest friends from high school died a week apart just a couple of years ago. And so this poem is for them. This is called Ohio, My Friends Are Dying. I see their final days in empty rooms in that city I left. See their days as empty rooms I left, empty because I left. Though surely their lives filled with things I can't see, filled as mine did elsewhere with time that gathered to become whatever their lives meant to them. Of course, more filled them than heroin. Days gathered into a heavy lens through which I see my friends blurred in those abstract rooms that suddenly emptied. Little Domestic Elegies. This is in 3 short sections. 1. When the backyard light came on, I was surprised to discover the air filled with snow so downy and silent it never quite reached the ground. When the light went out, all I could see was solid dark, still full of that snow. 2. On our first cold day in the new house, the clear world beyond us became fogged by the handprints of whoever had installed our windows. 3. Wind poured through the framed-up house they were building next door, an emptiness like photographic paper, waiting for some not yet installed light to turn on and imprint the room it has now become. And this is a poem that I wrote after the Pulse shooting, though sadly it could be after any mass shooting. But after that particular mass shooting, there was a news report that talked about when the first responders went into that horrific space, and with all of these bodies that had been shot, and all of their cell phones were ringing, and that seemed like a poem to me. So I wrote this poem called Caroline. Phones were ringing In the pockets of the living and the dead, the living stepped carefully among. The whole still room was lit with sound like a switchboard, and those who could answer said hello. Then it was just the dead, the living trapped inside their clothes, ringing and ringing them. And this was the best image we had of what made us a nation. All right, here's a lighter poem. This is about a bird, and it is and a plane flight, and it's set in the Denver International Airport. At least in my mind, it could really be any airport. This is called The Future. It's in 2 sections. 1. A bird in the airport hopping among our feet. Dun puffed chest, a sparrow, I think, collecting bits of popcorn beside the luggage, while invisible speakers fill the air with names of cities irrelevant to the air outside, from which this bird has become mysteriously separated. What should be done for her? Little feathered heart, little Dickinson maybe, who won't let any of us touch her. The light is mostly natural light. The high ceiling support beams make the environment not unsuitable. If only she could be coaxed down the jetway and onto the plane to take to the sky inside our human endeavor, wouldn't that be a kind of release? 2. After we boarded and settled into our seats, after the lights dimmed and the movie began, the plane shifted course imperceptibly, disconnected now from the narrow bit of earth we expected to receive us. When we landed, we were together in that daze of arrival, carried reflexively by the moving sidewalk, the sky train, until I was already well inside the city I must assume was arriving suddenly into each of us. All around me, palm trees, saguaros, floating puffs of cloud. And it became clear we were in, of all places, Phoenix. I don't have a lot of animals in my poems, but here's another animal poem. And this is, it's a weird form. It's a prose poem, but if you can see this, like the lines, like the paragraphs are almost like very long lines. So it's prose, but it's barely prose. Parable of Childhood. It's about a dog. When the dog finally died, Dad dug a hole beside the fence and buried her in a boot box. She's gone, but she had a good life, Mom said. It's okay to be sad. Next day, the boy came into the kitchen holding the box in front of him. She's not gone. She's still in there, he said. Look. Mom lifted the lid. Sweetie, when things die, we give them back to the earth. And then we forget them there? Yes and no, Dad replied. He put the box in the hole and covered it over. Together, they walked back to the house. In the morning, the box was on the kitchen counter. I couldn't sleep, the boy said. She was all alone out there. Maybe that's how she wants it to be, Dad replied. No, she doesn't want anything, the boy said. She's dead. But her box was full of air inside the earth. That wasn't right. They filled the box with dirt and placed it inside the hole. What does it mean to die? The boy asked. Dad thought of his own father who died a year before the boy was born, a long suffering until at last his body had filled with snow. No one knows what death is, Dad said. I wish I had a better answer for you. 4 days passed before the box, heavy with dirt and rot, arrived again inside the house. Why is this here? Dad asked. No one knows what death is, the boy said. I wanted to find out. Jesus, Dad said, and went out to the garage. Mom said gently, no, when things die, they're gone, so we return them to the earth. The dog was gone. That was clear. But the dog was also right there, just below the surface, packed in darkness. The boy could bring her back inside whenever he wanted, no matter what his parents said. I turned 45 this year, which the internet tells me is middle age. So this poem is called Middle Age. It's in 2 sections. 1. This body, which equals a life, no more, no less, and thus is incomplete, even asleep, even watching TV, soon will rise to pee, to find itself in the mirror, examining what this body appears to be. And I was wrong thinking time gathers inside me. I was wrong inside my body moving through time. So that now I imagine a dot matrix printhead growing a picture, each pass revealing one more line of body until the image is whole, and then some other body must come and dispose of it. 2. At my 1-week follow-up appointment, I listened to the person who had opened for the first time ever my abdominal cavity, grown from nothing like the hollow of a pepper. I watched her fingers hold a plastic pen that marked on a pad her swoops of thought. The light around us had poured into my body, annihilating its darkness, where no one lives. Okay, here's continuing with a theme. I've had a lot of friends who have been sick and have died in the last couple of years. And so this poem came out of watching that happen. This is called Mind-Body Problem. It's a love poem, though. I should say that my wife is not actually sick in this way, as far as I'm aware, but it sort of folds a love poem over other couples I've known who have gone through this. This is called Mind-Body Problem. When I touch your skin and goosebumps lift, it's your mind that surfaces there. When your iris tightens mechanically around your pupil, that aperture becomes for me the blacked out cockpit of your mind. It's your mind that touches your tongue to mine, your mind that when you're driving lowers your hand to my thigh almost mindlessly. Your mind like a pilot light inside your sleep, your mind that beats your heart slower than faster, infusion pump in the chest flooding your mind. But your heart is not your mind. The curve of your hip, the soft skin of your wrist is not your mind. The tumor growing in your brain is just your brain, I say. The shape of your face, the sound of your voice, which I love so much, is not your mind. Your mind spills through. Fire, I can't stop watching from the far side of this darkening valley. And I'm just going to read one more poem, but it's a little long. And I should say that not everything in my poems is autobiographically true. But this is a poem where everything in this is absolutely true. And this is a poem about my father's best friend when I was growing up, who I had been told had done some time in prison, but I didn't really know what for. And I had this moment where I realized I had access to this database through my university computer that was about all of these tiny local papers. And I realized that I could just look them up and find out what happened. And I was a little bit shocked to discover, well, more than a little bit shocked to discover what I found. And then it's also true that on September 10th, 2001, I did see Salman Rushdie read in Houston. And it was shortly after the fatwa against him had been lifted, and it was protested by a lot of fundamentalists, and it was a very strange event. And then the next morning we woke up and 9/11 happened. So this is called On History. 1. In December 1961, George Trabian shot Winifred Jean Whitaker and left her body beside the Trinity River in one of the long twin shadows of the I-10 overpass. In August 1988, George Trabian took me out on Trinity Bay in his 25-foot sloop and taught me how to sail. Past the bridge, he cut the engine, and I felt us lock suddenly into the wind dragging overhead, invisible, unrelenting machine. 2. Trabian was in a, quote, narcotics-fueled frenzy when he murdered Whitaker while searching for more drugs, quote, on the Negro side of town, when he attempted to assault a 14-year-old girl, then returned her home, when he burglarized a house in wealthy River Oaks for $7. In the subsequent trial, which lasted 3 months, the prosecutor sought the death penalty, but did not succeed. 3. The Trinity River enters Trinity Bay by way of the Anahuac Channel, which was cut through the Marsh-Pock Delta by the Army Corps of Engineers, and on the map looks like a straw thrust into the bay's broad bladder. Those afternoons George took me sailing. I don't believe we ever went over to that other side of the bay. 4. He drank cans of beer from a plastic cooler. I drank 7-Up. He taught me to tie knots and watch the mainsail for luffing. Those afternoons were a favor to my father, who still had to work while I was visiting from Ohio. George, who'd become a professor after 15 years in prison, had his summers off. 5. Trabine was finally arrested in the lobby of the Auditorium Hotel, which I'm shocked to discover became the Lancaster, and where on September 10th, 2001, I had drinks after seeing Salman Rushdie read. The event was picketed by fundamentalists. Police barricades maintained the channel through the crowd. I don't remember what Rushdie read or anything he said. I remember passing through that compacted organ of anger and into the vast theater, red and plush and radiant with money. The protesters remained outside, and Rushdie was the only person facing their direction as he spoke. And of course, it was September 10th, 2001. 6. The family of Winifred Jean Whitaker must despise George Trabine, who is surely both abstract and the very most powerful expression of real. They would be right to say it was a racist travesty of justice he became a professor and remained for the rest of his life in Houston, their town, walking free with his title and the prestige it carried. They must find it horrific he could spend 20 years running a master's program for prisoners, that he had the means and time to own a boat and teach a boy to sail. 7. My God, why did my father let George Trabine take me out alone on his boat? To show friendship, to offer trust? As a teenager, my father had wanted to be a priest, though by 1988, he'd long become an unshakable atheist. I know George was his good friend, and no doubt Dad thought I would enjoy sailing. Beyond that, it was a religious decision, an atavism, a proof of faith, I'm pretty sure. 8. Dare I say, of the men I spent time with as a child, George was among the very kindest and most generous, and he offered me a respectfulness I didn't at 12 deserve. I sometimes flip through the Royce's Sailing Illustrated he gave me, and I recall his insistence that a sloop rolled by the wind would quickly right itself. Surely he said that only to allay my fear when the boat heeled hard and I yelped, thinking we were going over. He is to me both an abstraction and a very powerful expression of real, which is why I'm still here in the library so late in the afternoon, retrieving articles from 1961 on George Trabine. Thank you.
Wayne Miller. Okay, I've got a couple things I've got to take care of here. First, I promised you all links to the book buying page. There they are. You've heard the first two poets tonight. All three of them have books that you can purchase at this link, and you can make a donation to the WordWorks if you like this series and want to support it. As we're coming down to the halfway mark, or actually the 3/4 mark, let me introduce Jenny Molberg. She's coming to us tonight from Kansas City, Missouri. She's the author of Marvels of the Invisible, winner of the Berkshire Prize 2017, and Refusal Poems 2020. Jenny co-edited the Unsung Masters series collection, Adelaide Crapsey, on the life and work of an American master. Her poems have appeared in a number of journals, including Plowshares, Gulf Coast, Missouri Review, Poetry International, Boulevard, Copper Nickel, The Adroit Journal, Best New Poets, and other publications. Wow, that's a lot of publications. So without more, let's hear from the incomparable Jenny Molberg.
Thank you so much, Henry. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm so grateful to be reading tonight here with David and Wayne. David was my most important teacher of poetry. I met him when I was 22 years old. I was just starting my MFA. And he taught me so much about the craft of writing poems, but I think even more importantly, kind of like what Henry said at the beginning of the evening, he modeled a love and passion for poetry that has stayed with me through these nearly 15 years. I can't believe it. And he continues to teach me as we've stayed good friends and shared our poems. I'm so excited to be with you here today, David, to celebrate your wonderful new book that I love so much, The World to Come. And Wayne, thank you for moving to Denver so I could take your job. But no, seriously, Wayne, I admire your work so much, and I'm thrilled about We the Jury, and that was a beautiful reading. And Henry, thank you for hosting a beautiful poet in your own right. I want to start my reading tonight with a content warning. Much of what I'm going to read will deal with violence and domestic abuse. So if you feel you need to excuse yourself or step away from these poems, please do what's best for you. I thought I'd start by reading some poems from my new book. It's called The Court of No Record, and it will be out in 2023. The book deals with failures of the American justice system and law enforcement, especially when it comes to protecting victims of violence and abuse. Many of the poems arise from personal experience. In the midst of the violence and injustice that we're witness to in this country today, I want to say that I stand in solidarity with anyone who has experienced injustice. And though yesterday's verdict was not justice, I hope that it's a small step in a direction toward change. So this first poem, thanks to Wayne and Nikki and Brian, because this first poem will come out soon in Copper Nickel. Hunting. The bow is an extension of the arm. The yellow-headed blackbird knows to stop its singing. The gun is an extension of the brain. A cow lows in the twilit field. The man says she's looking for her calf. The elk heads line the wall. The children have their mothers shot. The knife is an extension of the hand. Find the place between the ribs, he says, upward. The hook is the extension of the line. Bait is a human lie made with a fly-shaped mold. Meat is the moment of death. Gun is the language that means America. The bullet is an extension of the gun's idea, which was a man who thought all the way through. So there is a deep-seated historical violence in our police force. Studies have found that romantic partners of police officers suffer domestic abuse at rates significantly higher than the general population. So this next poem deals with that fact. Occam's razor. My friend and I are trauma bonded. When our abuser's wife lies, our Pegasus brains blink on in the night, imaginary beacons. If you hear hooves, remember there are no unicorns, only the meatpacking plant. The train you hear is no tornado, not northern lights, but the sky's explainable chemistry. Wittgenstein says, if a sign is not necessary, then it is meaningless. The abominable snowman shoves one giant fur toe beyond the tree line, testing our boundaries. Swinburne says, either science is irrational or the principle of simplicity is a fundamental synthetic a priori truth. A woman's cop husband shot her twice in the head, placed his service gun beneath her pajamaed chest. Her fuzzy pink slippers peeked from the closet. The dog's leash a golden lasso on the floor. A plurality can't be posited without meaning. The cop husband invented his wife's suicide note, thinking her dead. If you can sail around the world, then it is not flat. Our abuser's wife feeds the cat, makes some calls, bandages her hand. He says to her, "Don't push it." We know why she lies. We lied for him too. So it's rare that we encounter female forensic scientists of history. One of my favorites is Frances Glessner Lee, who left her marriage to pursue a career in legal medicine. And she's known for her nutshell studies of unexplained death. I don't know if you've all seen this. There's a beautiful book of photography that explores that collection, but she made these painstakingly beautiful, detailed miniatures of crime scenes that were later used as to train police at Harvard. So I'm going to actually briefly share my screen so that you can see one of the miniatures that inspired this poem. So let's see here. Okay. So this is the red bedroom. And she would have been disappointed for anyone to call them dollhouses, but they're really incredible if you want to check them out. So that's Frances Glessner Lee. This poem is called The Miniaturist, and it has an epigraph from Susan Stewart's On Longing, which reads, "Within, within, within." The Miniaturist. Cops in their badges and high and tight haircuts squat to peer inside her dollhouse. She wants them to. She wants them to see the overturned chair, white knit bare, the size of a child's toe. She teaches them to read a body, cigarettes rolled with receipt paper, the kiss of pink on the underside of a pillow, a clue. What do you expect her to hate about herself? I think I see Frances, large hands under a jeweler's loop, screwing a toothpick into a weather vane, yarning a sewing wheel, making dead women smaller so she can save them. She stretches linoleum across her little kitchen. It's 1947. She destroys what is painstaking, blowtorches the roof, plants a bottle of Seconal. The pharmacist's name, small as a line of ants. Tuft of Siberian weasel in the ferrule of her paintbrush. I am a mirror as I rest beneath her gravestone, the biographer writes. I must hate the woman they keep telling me to be, I think, peering into Frances so I can become what I can be. I am diffusing. There's a fuse in me in the shape of a brush. Stop making me sexual. Stop calling me mine. My quilt is edged in rickrack. My glass of whiskey, a thimbleful of sap. Pet milk in little cans on the sill. I wake in the red bedroom with bangles on my wrists, and the old thought creeps in again. I do not recognize my life. I do not recognize these small woven socks, my gauzy nightgown, my hands that move like mittens. There is blood on my clothes and in my hair. No, it is nail polish. My windows are plastic. My hands are in my hair. The noose is made of cooking twine. A man is looking in. These next two poems that I'll read come from a section in the book that is a court hearing in verse. It draws on personal experience, but also abstracts much of the detail. And I kind of just want to address a major problem that I think we have in our legal system, which is a failure to protect victims of domestic abuse. And also the power that abusers still often hold to use the court system as a way to further harass and abuse their victims. So I'll read a couple of those poems, and then I'll read a couple of poems from Refusal. And if you hear a racket in the background, it's my dog. Sorry. Proceedings. The honorable answer offers me the option to reset my court date due to his personal relationship with my abuser's mother. I have driven halfway across middle America, through rhinestone-studded stampedes in the great dripping caves of the Bible Belt, to Broken Mirror County. Broken Mirror, where I was once thrown in a room with a pit bull. The dog slept with his sweet paw around me and breathed his panicky breath into my neck. To say me is a stretch. The self was a rock blown into many rocks, sparkling and hot. The alpha made of me a souvenir. He put me in a box he occasionally opened, then vanished me in the palm of his hand. Whereupon the following proceedings were heard in the court of no record. To say heard is a stretch. To say stretch is a lie. My pleated pants were drenched in sweat as my abuser's lawyer and her wrinkled skirt and ruffled sweater heckled me into a corner. To say corner is generous, because in the court of no record, where the abuser is petitioner and the victim respondent, the walls are made of ideas so the men can walk straight through them. Her testimony. I let go of her hand, turning blue. We have been in court 8 hours. Between our hearts, a tether, a leash. When she cries, I cry. A doggy sound, a cat too high in a tree, curled about the night from the inside out. When she describes her abuse, the lawyer says, again, Your Honor, not relevant, Your Honor. At the plaintiff's table, laughter erupts. Was there coerced sex in your relationship? The lawyer asks. Yes, she says. We are killing a lot of trees, the lawyer says, handing over the evidence. I channel my night vision, pitch its green across the room. The honorable answer says, you must understand that sometimes people are in different phases of their journey with abuse. I am strapped to my chair. I bark from the forest floor. I disappear the wooden witness stand. The court does not care. The court will open the wound, will fill it with paper. So I'll just read 2 more poems. These are both from Refusal. This next poem is Epistle from the Hospital for Text Messaging. I have made of myself a rabbit. I can no longer speak. Language is only the click, click, click of my heart ticking faster now. I stepped out of my dress. I auto-filled myself. I slipped the gray skins over my head. I know you love to watch the animal of me, my fast pounding brain, how I enter the garden to pluck berries with my teeth, then the ellipses of my leaving. I know you love to watch the end of me. I vanish beyond the field whose borders I built with your 1,000 barbed unsaids. I vanish into the sky. I vanish into the moon, this lemon slice of dead volcano. Here I wait, my fingerless ears poised as satellites, projecting my rabbit-shaped silence on space's blank walls. Something I don't understand about myself makes people want to hurt me. Okay, so this will be my last poem, and thank you so much to all of you for being here and holding this space with us. In Refusal, there is a sort of modern day Ophelia who has access to therapy, who like has a mother figure, who I kind of rewrote from the play. And she takes her story back into her own hands by escaping the enforced narrative and surviving. So this is Loving Ophelia Is. Loving Ophelia is loving a ghost. And loving a ghost is loving yourself. And loving yourself is a sudden sorrow. And a sudden sorrow is the place where the river pools. And the place where the river pools is not suicide. And not suicide is confronting the unknown. And confronting the unknown is the active condition of womanhood. And the active condition of womanhood is the beauteous nature of Denmark. And the beauteous nature of Denmark is lovesickness. And lovesickness is obsession with a version of yourself. An obsession with a version of yourself is egomania. And egomania is a room of mirrors. And a room of mirrors is love and hate simultaneously. And love and hate simultaneously is the trick of abuse. And the trick of abuse is a vexation of the mind. And a vexation of the mind is the feeble dawn of gaslight and tea. And the feeble dawn of gaslight and tea is an overbearing husband. And an overbearing husband is a soliloquy of cliches. And a soliloquy of cliches is the misery of scholars. And the misery of scholars is an old friend's skull. And an old friend's skull is a sudden sorrow. And a sudden sorrow is holding one's breath. And holding one's breath is swimming away. And swimming away is the other shore on which Ophelia has woken. Thank you.
Jenny Molberg. Let's have some applause there. And let's light up this screen with applause for our three poets tonight: David Keplinger, Wayne Miller, and Jenny Molberg. What an I am very moved. It was a strong and moving evening of poetry. I thank all three of our poets. I will put into the chat again a place where you can purchase their books and donate to the Word Works. Just an incredible evening. And so in closing, I hope you enjoyed this evening's readers and will extend your enjoyment by purchasing their books and letting others know about this series. I just put those links back into the chat. Please come out on Monday, May 3rd, 2021, when Cafe Muse Online will present poets David Baker and Carl Phillips. And we'll see you again on Poets versus the Pandemic on May 19th, 2021, with our own Karen Alanier, who's up there in one of those little boxes, reading from her new book, How We Hold On. So everyone, from Poets versus the Pandemic, good night and stay safe.